50% of all the food going to Africa comes out of Ukraine.
So, bro, is it about rare earth minerals? Is it about money, or is it actually caring about the Ukrainian people?
For me, it's about the principle of self-determination. I mean, that's what influenced me growing up, right? My grandfather's struggle against colonialism and the belief that people should have the right to have self-determination of their nationhood. It's why I support a Palestinian state, self-determination for Palestinians. It's why I support a Jewish state of the state of Israel.
Do you support Hamas and the right for Palestinians to engage in self-defense against Israel?
I don't support Hamas.
So you don't support. So Hamas is an organization with Palestinians, correct? Israel is illegally occupying Gaza and the West Bank and committing a genocide according to international courts. If anyone has the right to self-defense, it will be Palestinians, aka Hamas.
Well, look,
so how do you oppose that, but you want to wage war with Russia because the United States is in their backyard?
I come from a tradition of belief that nonviolence demonstration and the tradition of Gandhi or King is what's going to help.
Why not apply that to Ukraine? There was a peace deal on the table,
well, because that was the invasion of a sovereign state.
Israel's invading Palestine. What's poppin', my friends, my family? Welcome back to another week of RBN Live. Last week was kind of fun, wasn't it? I'm surprised that interview didn't get more coverage among independent media, if I'm going to be honest. It was really too easy. I've been waiting for this sparring session with from someone from the NATO left for a very, very long time. And out of all the people who I've been challenging to debate, Ro Khanna being the one to accept it was not on my bingo card. Right now, I've been calling out, I'm the bad guy on Twitter because I've been calling out all the fake MAGA influencers who just now discovered how evil Israel was after they told people to vote for the biggest Zionist cuck sellout of modern times, Donald Trump. So I would love to have Ian Carroll or Dave Smith come on and explain to me why they sold Donald Trump as some sort of anti-establishment fighter. I would love for someone to explain to me why Donald Trump is anti-NATO when Donald Trump successfully not lobbied for a NATO country to spend more into NATO. I would love for someone to explain to me how Donald Trump is anti-NATO when he floated a peace deal that he knew Russia would turn down, and now he have defense advisors that are telling Ukrainians they have to lower the conscription age to 18. So maybe I might get an answer for those people one day, but for now, I take a lot of pleasure pressing Roe and these social democrats for supporting one of the most evil administrations we've seen in my lifetime. And that's why I got that moment where I asked Roe, will you vote for a anti-gay bigot? Like a raging anti-gay bigot. Will you vote for someone who advocated bombing Jewish people? If not, why are you guys okay supporting and propping up a rabid anti-Palestinian bigot in Joe Biden? Which leads, and we have an amazing guest. I'm going to introduce her very soon. We have the amazing independent journalist Rachel Blevins who will be joining us. But we will be covering first how 60 Minutes, MSNBC, and overall the liberal class is now way more comfortable talking about the genocide in Gaza. And we're going to cover this segment first where Chris says, and you guys see the title here, Biden is leaving a disgraceful legacy on Gaza. Now, before anyone get Chris Hayes flowers here, what does it say about Chris Hayes and Ro Khanna and all these quote-unquote liberal people that they was willing to vote for a guy who committed crimes in Gaza that they was 100% aware of? Isn't it worse that Chris Hayes, you was aware of Biden's crimes in Gaza, and now all of a sudden you want to report on it now that Democrats lost? I am way more forgiving. I said this many times before. You guys see the heat I show to people, especially influencers on social media. So people think Nick is the big bad guy. I'm a fucking hothead. Actually, the exact opposite. I actually show a lot of grace towards people who live in the most propagandized country of all time, the United States. So if I say the United States is the most propagandized country in the world, shouldn't I show leniency to people who are victims of propaganda? Doesn't that make sense? But I am not lenient towards people like Chris Hayes and Ian Carroll and Dave Smith, propagandists who know better. Ian Carroll, do you see Ian Carroll expose Israel to Elon Musk? It doesn't matter. He told his supporters to support Donald Trump, and Donald Trump smeared Americans as terrorists. He said Americans are terrorists for protesting the genocidal state of Israel. So whatever work Ian Carroll, Dave Smith, or Chris Hayes does calling out Israel means jack shit, fam. If they are just going to sheep her people into a Zionist empire. Now, let me introduce my guest. I went on a longer rant than I planned. Let me introduce my guest. We have an amazing geopolitical commentator, independent journalist, has a great YouTube channel. I think it's called Rachel Blevins, self-named as well. So thank you for joining us on RBN. Once again, Rachel Blevins.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I was enjoying listening to the rant, so you can keep on. But I mean, I'm right there with you looking at these figures in the mainstream media who, for the last 15 months now, have acted as though there's no genocide, right? They see no evil, they hear no evil, and then they turn right back around. And now that Biden's time is over, now that, continuing to promote him and Kamala Harris, now that that didn't work out for them, and now that it's about to become Donald Trump's problem, then all of a sudden you're seeing the mainstream media talking about just how bad the situation is in Gaza. And it's like, yeah, we've all been here talking about this for the last 15 months. It's not even nice that you guys just decided to show up here because you're only doing it for political purposes because now it suits your belief system, not because it did, for the last over a year now.
Yeah, that's very well said. And that's why I'm not going to do this thing where I say, oh, props to Chris Hayes. No, Chris Hayes is covering this so he can get credibility back, so he can later sell a Democrat down the line. The same way when Rokan asked me, Nick, will you support Bernie? No, we're not doing this thing where we lending any credibility towards the establishment. And before I get into the segment, because I will actually love your help in breaking this down, because this segment is very glorious in multiple ways. Like, not just the straightforward way of him calling out Israel. For example, look at the screen here. You guys see how he just now discovered what Leahy's law is? You know, the thing we covered on RBN, and I'm sure, Rachel, you covered many times on your show. I consistently brought up Leahy's law, but now all of a sudden, MSNBC, they understand what Leahy's law is. So before we get into some propaganda analyzing here, Rachel, I want to ask you just in general, as a warm-up, what's your impressions on the lasting legacy of Joe Biden and the geopolitical situation with Donald Trump now heading to the White House? Biden, and I know it's very hard to thread this needle because we have all the presidents are war criminals. Like, they all have bodies, kill counts in the hundreds of thousands, in the millions. But when I look at the Biden administration, maybe it's recency bias, but I see them as easily the most thuggish, with George Bush Jr. obviously being right there, the most thuggish, barbaric, violent, hypocritical administration we've ever seen. What's your thought, Rachel?
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to Joe Biden, Genocide Joe is what he is going to forever be known as, right? That is the moniker that will always go with his name. And I think he's aware of that. Now, do I think he cares about that? Honestly, no, because he looks at someone like George W. Bush and he goes, oh, well, he was rebranded. After just a few years, we looked at someone like W. Bush and we go, oh, he's just this harmless grandfather who loves painting and, hanging out with his grandchildren, and randomly Michelle Obama. And Biden is in that position now where he thinks that he is going to survive this politically, and the media may try to help him do so. But I think we have to remember that his administration, first of all, it's based on lies, right? He came in selling student debt relief. He came in with all of these promises. And then he provided none of it for the American people. And he then immediately took a U-turn and focused on Ukraine. And Ukraine and the war there became his entire personality, right? It felt like he wanted to go to a full-on war with Russia, and he has gotten the US as close to that as we have ever been. I mean, even just looking at in recent weeks where his administration has removed restrictions on the use of long-range weapons, literally allowing American soldiers to carry out attacks, yes, involving Ukrainian soldiers, but the American soldiers are required to carry out attacks deep inside Russian territory. It's like he is asking for World War III. And then, as if that wasn't enough, then he's added genocide on top of it. And for the last 15 months, we've been in a position where, yes, we know that Joe Biden is a self-proclaimed Zionist. He's very proud of that. But he has literally set out not one condition for Netanyahu's government in order to get access to more weapons and more lethal aid. And even bringing that up, anyone who tells the Biden administration, hey, maybe you should pull back, right? Maybe you should tell Netanyahu that in order to get this next batch of 2,000-pound bombs, that they have to kill less Palestinians or let more humanitarian aid in. His administration has wanted to hear none of it. And I think that it's things like those that they should be attached to Biden for the rest of his life when we look back at his legacy and we remember that it was this cold-hearted legacy of more and more war to the point that it has damaged the United States even further in the eyes of the rest of the world, as if that could get even worse right after the Iraq War and all of the meddling campaigns and color revolutions that the US has carried out around the world. That wasn't enough. You had the Biden administration single-handedly over the course of 4 years, not only support a genocide, but also get us steps away from World War III. And they're now setting it up for the Trump administration to come in. And I think that there is going to be a lot on the Trump administration's plate. I'm very curious to see how they handle it because I've been listening to Trump's new pick for National Security Advisor, Florida Congressman Mike Waltz, and he's not making it sound like we're ready for peace talks and everything's going to be good to go and this war is going to come to an end. He's talking about how Kiev needs to lower their conscription age down to 18 so that they can get hundreds of thousands of more men on the battlefield to go fight and die in war against Russia. So it's very telling to me. Yes, Trump campaigned on one thing. He always does. But when you look at the people around him, the pro-Zionist, anti-Iran, anti-China neocons that he always surrounds himself with, then you start going, okay, maybe we need to be paying attention to the people that are around him, that are in his ear, because my concern is that they are going to be the ones directing his foreign policy much more than just Trump from the campaign trail who said, I'm going to end the war in 24 hours and stop all of the killing.
Very well said. And Trump is obviously a guy who just for appearance, like he's gonna be one. He's gonna be the messenger, the salesman. I think it was very similar in his first term. It's the swamp monster in the background that really will be influencing policy, which is why I said famously during my speech in Chicago, don't pay attention to who they hire, not their messaging. Pay attention to who they hire, which is why I was warning all the dumb leftists in the United States who voted for Joe Biden. The second that Joe Biden had Anthony Blinken as his foreign policy advisor, I remember yelling at Bernie people, what do you mean you voted for Biden? He's allied with Anthony Blinken. And they were, whatever. And then what happened? He ended up supporting a genocide. You guys think it's a coincidence that he has someone who's a hardcore Zionist? And to be fair, Anthony Blinken been with Biden for decades, since the Afghanistan war, Iraq war, where they had helped manufacture consent towards that. And what we've seen with Biden now, we're sending all this extra money to Ukraine, additional weapons to Israel on his way out. During the lame duck term, that is when the president is supposed to do stuff for the people. Like theoretically, you're supposed to do stuff for the people. As a lame duck, you're like, I don't have to worry about the political consequences. I'm gonna do something for the people. Biden did the exact opposite. He did everything for the war machine. He did all the worst things he can possibly do in the lame duck period. Even fucking pardoning the Catholic kids, corrupt judge, like the worst possible thing. And that tells me that we dodged a bullet, my friends, because usually the second term of a presidency is way worse. I learned this during Obama, during my liberal days, where I explained this many times before. Last time I voted for less two evils was 2012, and I remember being unsatisfied with Obama. But like, okay, after we give Obama a second term, then he won't have to worry about Republican. No, it was the exact opposite. We voted for Obama the second term. He became even more unhinged. He doubled down on the drone program. He doubled down on his support to Israel, which led to the initial slaughter of Gaza in 2014. I can go on and on and on. But that's the legacy we're going to see from Joe Biden, is his continued push toward genocide. Now, before we get to the clip, I'm going to show you what MSNBC has been saying regarding Biden's legacy, which people are in the media starting to question. And I want to get your thoughts on this regarding the new strategy we're seeing from Democrats. I'm seeing the Democrats call out billionaires. It's laughable. There's a Morning Joe segment where it was like calling out billionaires and how the Democrats is a party against billionaires because Elon's propping up the right. And now we're seeing them calling out Biden for his human rights atrocities. There's a lot of reasons why they're doing this. I think one of the kind of more childish reasons they're doing this is because Biden didn't drop out of the race like he should have. Not only did he not drop out of the race, he now saying that if he would have stayed in the race, he would have won, essentially stabbing Kamala in the back, Pelosi in the back, and the entirety of the liberal corporate media who called for him to drop out. So, guys, the only reason they're doing this is because they're pissed. They're pissed at Biden, and now they're 100% down with tarnishing his legacy. I know that was a lot, but Rachel, was there anything you want to add before we go? I want to play this clip, and we can break this down. Anything else you want to add before I move on?
Yeah, I think if Democrats want to start focusing on billionaires and, people like that, they need to start talking about people within their own party, people like Nancy Pelosi, who have been there for God knows how many decades and have become extremely wealthy off of their position in Congress. I think the call is coming from inside the House here, right? Democrats and Republicans both have the same problems. And the longer that they sit there and point fingers at each other, the less that they actually get done for the American people.
Yeah, let's watch this clip, and feel free to interrupt because I think this is hilarious propaganda. And I'm sure you guys would have realized it in the very beginning. So let's play it. This is Chris Hayes going after Biden for leaving a disgraceful legacy on Gaza. And then I'm going to play a little bit of 60 Minutes. The 60 Minutes went a little bit longer. So I have like two just short clips I'm going to play on 60 Minutes. I want to play more of this because listen to like the worldview. And it was exposed when I was talking to Ro. You guys see how Ro Khanna, he stood no chance against me. Because his worldview is so twisted. The liberal worldview is so twisted. And I don't know if you saw it, Rachel, but at one point he asked me, he was like, Nick, you don't think the United States ever had any interventions that was meant for humanitarian purposes? I was like, no, what the fuck? No, I don't believe that. So let's listen to the beginning. You guys see where I'm going at here.
Since the end of the last World War, there have been basically two kind of competing visions of America's role in the world, at least among the two major parties. There's an liberal international view, right? That human rights should matter, that there should be a uniform standard globally that applies to every nation, including us, the U.S., and our.
Oh, you sweet summer children. You guys see, this is the liberal imperialist view. You guys see, as liberal, we believe in humanitarianism. This is the humanitarian intervention ideology that Ro Khanna was shocked to see that I didn't support, because I didn't even support the premise that they cared about Ukrainians. Like the premise that they care about Ukrainians was absurd to me. But let's continue and I'll get you in there, Rachel.
Matter, that there should be a uniform standard globally that applies to every nation, including us, the U.S., and our allies. A regime of international norms and, most importantly, international law, like real international law, that the U.S. could shape and strengthen. Now, to be clear, I wasn't born yesterday. I'm not completely naive. Yes, that standard is one that is very, very often only given lip service to while the U.S. pursues pure power politics. But it is a meaningful and important standard, as is the aspiration.
Do you realize that those two sentences contradict each other? He said, "Yeah, I know all the time. I know we contradict ourselves all the time regarding the standards of international law, but it's still important to maintain." I argue, no, it's not. That the foundation of international law was only used to punish African countries, the Russians, and people the United States are enemies of. And if you're not going to maintain a standard practice of international law, it's actually worse to have this level of hypocrisy that is later weaponized But Rachel, what you thought? Before I continue to play more of this, you guys see how liberals have this idea that the United States is here to defend world order, even though we may have some hypocrisies. It's like the delusional liberal idea. Do you have any thoughts before I continue?
Yeah, I would love to know what Chris Hayes thinks about the NATO alliance and how we've gotten to this point, right? Because that's exactly, that about sums up NATO. This idea that, hey, we're just going to put together this alliance. We're going to, help invoke the international rules-based order, blah, blah, blah. And then don't come to us and ask questions when we continue to expand NATO right up to Russia's doorstep. And now you put Russia in this place where they're going, okay, if we don't put our foot down now, it's going to get worse and worse to the point where we're going to be in World War III. That's why you've had Russia saying the exact same things about its security concerns for decades now. And it's just fascinating to me that members of the mainstream media, I don't even want to know what Chris Hayes gets paid, right? How many $1 million are in his salary every year. But he can sit there and say, oh, yeah, our international law, whatever. Well, clearly it isn't working, because we can look at Gaza and know that if we had any kind of legitimate international law, then something would have been done by now. When you look at all of the Palestinians that continue to suffer, that are starving to death or being burned to death because Israel just dropped another bomb on a refugee camp, and you look at examples like that, it is such a reminder that if we want to talk about international law or war crimes or any of these bodies like the ICJ or the ICC being worth anything, then they would be addressing the worst humanitarian crisis in the world that is currently not only going on right now, but is also being live streamed to the entire world. And the fact that the mainstream media, they act like, oh, it's not that bad, or it's only bad when we say it is, it's just a level of hypocrisy that is mind-boggling.
Yeah, very well said. And I'm actually glad that 40 Democrats joined the Republicans to sanction the ICC. I'm glad in the way that the facade is over. You know what I mean? Right. Because they're going to do it anyway. They're going to undermine international law anyway. I'm glad the facade is over. And that's why Ro Khanna was so easy to handle. Because how dare you quote and pretend that you guys are standing for international law as the Uniparty is voting to sanction international courts. Biden condemned the international courts. He condemned the UN investigations to Israeli war crimes. I'm going to show you guys how 60 Minutes exposed something that we covered before. The Biden administration's senior leadership was blocking reports of Israeli war crimes, not only blocking reports, but firing workers who disobeyed them and put those reports together. So the most evil of evil. Meanwhile, Chris Hayes was a strong, enthusiastic supporter of them, to the point where he was having a meltdown on election day because he wanted that team to win so bad. But anyway, I will shut up a bit. Feel free to interrupt if you have any thoughts as we play this. I want to play Chris Hayes' segment just for a little bit so you guys can see what his critique is. But I had to stop here because you guys, even in this analysis, still laced in so much liberalism. I couldn't help but stop and tell you guys what annoyed me, but let's continue to watch a little bit more of this.
It is a meaningful and important standard, as is the aspiration towards reaching it and the people that advocate holding it as a standard. So that's one vision. And then there's a kind of standard reactionary vision, right-wing vision, which is that might makes right. Universal norms are fictions that can never really constrain us. We're the greatest country ever.
The Biden administration,
and because
and this is annoying me. This is why the right-left paradigm is ridiculous. Because there's the right-wing view of might makes right. You mean Joe Biden? It's a vote. We have two right-wing parties in this country, and the right wing, they play their job because you have Biden that sent all 2,000-pound bombs to Israel, fighting against world courts for Israel, using their veto power for Israel. And then you will turn on Fox News and you hear some dickhead talk about how Biden is an agent of Hamas. Oh man, Biden is not, he's abandoning Israel. Like, you guys see how the two-party duopoly plays a game to convince people that there's a legitimate left-right paradigm on this issue. And then back to Ro Khanna, where Ro Khanna trying to pretend that Democrats are even a centrist party. How can you say you're a left-wing party? How can you even say you're a centrist party when you're arming Nazis? Like, what is being on the right wing? If you're supporting an ethno-state, an apartheid ethno-state, how can you say you're on the left? How can you stay in the center? Right? But anyway, let's continue. Feel free to chime in, but I'm playing a little bit more, and then I'll get you back in.
We are the greatest nation. It's just definitionally impossible for us or our allies to be on the wrong side of international law, which doesn't exist. And that view is strong and has a very long tradition. You could say it might have peaked or reached its apogee in the Cold War under Henry Kissinger, who sold successive administrations on dirty wars and proxy wars, funding, training, and arming right-wing militaries to oppose left-wing governments or activists. He enabled deadly terror in Chile and Argentina and South Africa and Indonesia, where, to be clear, Kissinger's support for a right-wing dictator led to the genocide of 200,000 East Timorese people by a U.S.-equipped army.
I swear to God, you guys know how much I watch corporate media in the last few years. This is like the only time I ever seen them mention this shit. That's how upset they are with Biden. This is a side point. I literally have never seen them ever mention the genocide sponsored by Henry Kissinger. They just fucking eulogize this mother. They eulogize all these war criminals not too long ago. Eulogize Ronald Reagan, all these war criminals. They praise Henry Kissinger all the time. Now they talking about these genocide. This is the real rules-based order. There's a reason why they always go back to Hitler. That's why everyone always invoke the Nazis. The reason why people in the West always invoke the Nazis, because if they was to use something modern, we talk about the United States. Rachel, anything you want to add before I continue? Anything you said, anything you want to add? Any context before we move on?
I think it's just a reminder that this is how they get the American people to play in this left-right paradigm, right? They convince you that this is your team. Your team may be the Democrats, it may be the Republicans, it may even be another third party, but you have to stand by your team. Your team is good and the other team is bad, except they can't really explain exactly as you were saying there. You know, when it comes to this history of U.S. foreign policy, everything that the U.S. has done, all of the genocides that the U.S. has supported over the years, or the horrific war crimes that the U.S. military has taken part in, they don't want you to talk about the fact that that involves both the left and the right and everybody in Washington, and that all of those Democrats and Republicans continue to work together. And that's how they get things done, right? We play this game with Congress where we act like, oh, they're on, complete opposite sides of the aisle and they're just going to fight all the time about everything. Well, then why do they get together every time it comes to, passing however many hundreds of billions of dollars we're up to, almost $1 trillion in a defense budget every single year, or it comes to funding foreign wars, or, sending lethal aid to various countries that have terrible human rights records? That's something that Democrats and Republicans come together on, no problem. And the mainstream media is not going to call it out because they're also part of it, right? They want you to believe that MSNBC is on one side and that Fox News is on the other. Well, Fox News would be sitting there defending our record, defending international law and the role that the U.S. plays in it. They're not going to sit there and complain about U.S. imperialism or all of the things that you and I would sit here and complain about now, because the mainstream media is part of it. At the end of the day, they're just kind of towing that line where they act like they care when it is politically convenient for them.
Yeah, very well said. And big shout out to my friend Landrew. The murder of 1 million East Timor by the late Jimmy Holy Man Carter. And that's why you guys didn't see me say one goddamn nice thing about Jimmy Carter. There was so much fucking cringe going on over the last few weeks. MSNBC, the same one who's now all of a sudden covering genocide now, they ran like a 48-hour marathon eulogizing Jimmy the Cut Carter. And they're not even like a dish at democracy now, I'm not a fan. But Jimmy Carter championed human rights, but also funded armed genocide. Yeah. The genocider also part-time human rights champion. Now, to me, and maybe I'm the asshole here, but once you fund a genocide, you're dead to me. There's no, he did this extra. No. He funded and enabled a genocide. That's the end of his eulogy right there. Great comment, Landrew, and thank you for that reminder. We don't have to watch the whole segment. I am kind of interested in seeing how he covered the rest of it. Let's watch a little bit more, and then we'll move on.
The great moral stains of U.S. foreign policy in the last 60 years. In El Salvador, where U.S.-backed forces fueled a civil war and murdered Catholic bishops, Catholic nuns, and social workers, an outrage that led the Carter administration to suspend military aid to the nation. And as the Cold War finally wound down, there was one lawmaker who made an indelible contribution to rolling back these abuses and attempting to set a standard for American behavior abroad and the behavior of our allies that we armed. That was Senator Pat Leahy, Democrat of Vermont, in 1997.
So once again, this part is very fascinating. MSNBC, a year and a half later, just now discovered Leahy's law. Something that we was called Hamas sympathizers, conspiracy theorists. How many hotspot videos I made? How many segments I've done where I quoted Leahy's law, where they call us terrorist supporters? Trump did it as well. He called Americans terrorist supporters. Remember when they say, "Oh man, Hillary Clinton should never be president because Hillary Clinton called people deplorables." And remember, Joe Biden said MAGA people are bastards. Aren't you un-American because you're bashing Americans? Meanwhile, Donald Trump said you're a terrorist if you support Palestine. Meanwhile, the argument I made, Leroy, and the argument I implore you guys to make is that if you are advocating for your country to uphold their values and be a shining beacon of international law, that is the most patriotic thing you can do. What you do if you're a treasonous little weasel is apologizing for criminals out of the search of personal power, which is 90% of American politics. Are people who want criminals or are okay with criminals being in charge of our government so they get personal benefit. They are treasonous. It's people like us and Rachel who advocate for human rights, for advocating for a country taking care of its people. We are the most patriotic people, not the fucking Zionist terrorist supporters who okay with having a president who violates international law. Right, but let's play this clip, and Rachel, I'll get you in here after this. This is the last part I'm putting on MSNBC because I'm actually shocked that they even shared this, where the segment about Leahy's law. And remember, the guy who wrote Leahy's law, he personally came out and said he wrote Leahy's law directly looking at Israel, and he wants Leahy law to be activated in the Gaza genocide. But let's continue here.
Called Leahy law. It expands our current law and seeks to ensure that United States assistance does not go to individuals who abuse human rights, to do everything possible to assure that in our efforts to support foreign security forces, that we respect human rights. We also prevent those who abuse human rights from receiving our assistance.
Seems straightforward. Leahy law barred the Pentagon and the Department of State from transferring U.S. arms to countries that we thought were committing human rights abuses. And that is what I keep thinking of as I process the news that on the way out the door, the Biden administration is going to transfer $8 billion more in weapons to Israel.
He's now processing this, Rachel. He wasn't processing this. He wasn't processing this when he was telling people to support Joe Biden. Now, I'm going to get you in here. I know I was ranting for a bit. Rachel, you have any thoughts before I continue?
Yeah, it's interesting when it comes to, I want to say the number was at 18 billion, or maybe it was, I think it was closer to $20 billion that the US had approved for Israel in the last year, plus some additional funding that went into an additional or increased US military presence in the region to support Israel. But it's interesting how so much of that, when Congress is passing, more and more support for Israel left and right, the media, they just kind of look away or they justify it in some way, right? They cheerlead on the fact that someone like Joe Biden, he's taking on Russia and now he's providing support to Israel. And it goes back to this continued team mentality, them thinking, we're on the right team here. Biden can't do anything wrong, except when we decide that he's no longer going to be the candidate and we're going to push him out, or rather the nominee for the election. Then they put in Kamala Harris. Clearly that didn't work out well. And now they've got Donald Trump, but they only have Trump for 4 more years. So now you've got the media in this position where the Democrats are scrambling, trying to figure out who do we run next? Hopefully they're thinking, well, I say hopefully they're thinking about who they're going to run in 4 years. Maybe they're just kind of playing right along here. But it is so telling to me when you start to see this media shift, because it's ushering in, telling us that they are going to start getting very critical of the US government under the Trump administration for supporting genocide. But they've ignored it while Biden has supported it for the last 15 months. And it has been all fine and good then. And it's just now that they're looking back at it going, oh, wait a second, did we miss something? Where the evidence has been out there in front of all of us. I mean, we've had various reports talking about the death toll, saying that it is wildly undercounted, that it's likely, tens of thousands of Palestinians who have been killed when you include in indirect deaths. So it could be as high as 186,000, if not even higher. You have these reports that are now calling it genocide. I mean, I remember at this time a year ago, it was almost kind of taboo to call it genocide, right? You still got people that were like, oh, well, we don't know if that's actually what Israel's doing. And then now a year later, all of a sudden people are going, oh yeah, it looks like Israel has some genocidal intent, that we can sit here and say, this has been here the entire time, and we've been calling it out the entire time, because Israel literally told us in October 2023 that they were cutting off all food, all water, all medicine, all fuel, that there was going to be a complete blockade, and that they viewed the Palestinians, that they were all complicit, even the around 1 million children in the Gaza Strip. So Israel made it very clear what they were doing. The US made it very clear that they were going to support and enable Israel the entire way. And that's exactly what they've done. So if the mainstream media is just now catching up to it, I don't know how they've been this blind, other than to say that they were willfully blind and chose not to report it again until it was convenient for them.
Bernie Sanders said calling what Israel's doing in Gaza a genocide is deflammatory. And now he want to do a face turn like, I want to ban arms. He couldn't even call it a genocide. And to my knowledge, I could be wrong here, but to my knowledge, to this day, he still didn't call it a genocide. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I haven't seen him call it that. To your other point regarding what the media actually knows, I'm only going to play one more minute because there's a part I'm waiting for in the segment. It's coming up here. In this next minute, Chris Hayes and MSNBC is about to tell on themselves because they're going to reveal how much they actually knew what was going on in Gaza the entire time. So what you're going to see in the next minute, I'm going to show you here, it's not what shit they just figured out. Do you guys think I'm 1,000 times smarter and better sourced than MSNBC with 0 staff? One if you count Zoya. I got 1 staff if you count Zoya. You think I'm more informed than these people? So what they're going to do, Rachel, here is receipt dump and show all the stuff that they knew, but they are holding back, but they're willing to share. For my hypothesis is because they want to torch the old guard of the Democratic Party. They was upset when the AOC lost her House race. So they are 100% down after Trump won again with dumping on the Biden-Pelosi guard now. Like they're okay with questioning Obama because that era is done. So they are willing to kill Biden in order to have a new Democratic Party that they're going to put PR behind that change. I'm telling you guys right now, question me now, quote me later. This is exactly what they're planning to do with their change in rhetoric. That's why Roe came on RBN in the first place to do a temperature test. Like I see exactly what they're doing. But let me show you guys this clip. This is the last thing I'm going to play. It'll show exactly how much MSNBC actually knew. When you see this, it's gonna blow your mind. Let's listen to it.
Including fighter jets and attack helicopters, bombs, warheads, and artillery shells. $8 billion in weaponry given over to an ally waging what I think can only be described as total war in Gaza that has, according to, I think, multiple independent experts and reporters and NGOs, been committing war crimes and ethnic cleansing, according to a former Israeli defense minister. Where
they're using words this year in the year 2025 I've never seen them used before, but I'll let it continue.
Soldiers say they have been ordered to target and kill innocents arbitrarily, including children, and that they have used Palestinians as human shields for their operation.
Rachel, they now reporting. MSNBC is now reporting on the fact that they're using Palestinians as human shields. But what else do they know that they hid from their audience until Donald Trump was about to take office? What else do they know? The list will astound you. Everything they about to show you here is what was covered on my show and on Rachel's show.
Operations in Gaza.
Continue.
As whistleblowers and detainees say the Israeli authorities regularly torture Palestinian prisoners.
So now they're talking about Palestinian prisoners being tortured to death. So now Crusade discovered that in January of 2025. They got some more.
The UN says Israel is using starvation as a strategy in Gaza.
So now they know that Israel is using starvation as a tool of war. What else do you know, Chris, that you've been holding back from your audience for so long?
Amnesty International says Israel is committing a genocide. Dozens of doctors, nurses, and paramedics who volunteered in Gaza and were there and saw up close told the New York Times they'd seen, as you see the images there in front of you, multiple children who were shot in the head or chest, bullets.
You guys know this testimony is not new. So, Chris, you didn't show this to your audience before November? Now, if you think I'm too mean, if you want to say, oh, at least Crusade is showing this instead of, yeah, I guess. He's the only person that want to show this, but I'm not going to give these people props for hiding information. He hid this information for his audience for months. Then be last clip I show on this segment. Rachel, anything else you want to add before I show you guys just a little? We're not going to go too much on 50 minutes. But I'm going to just show you guys a little bit. I said 50 minutes. I'm going to show you guys just a little bit what 60 Minutes said. Rachel, any final thoughts closing the Crusade segment? You guys see how much they actually knew what was going on? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Rachel.
I think the fact that I think you brought up a really important point there which was the fact that he could have done that entire report before election day, right? Nothing he mentioned there is new information that we just found out in the last week. No, he knew all of this going into election day. Now, obviously, we know that Donald Trump is, very pro-Zionist. We're not expecting him to necessarily do anything different in terms of actually caring about the Palestinian people or pulling back support from Israel in any way. But the media owes it to the public to be honest about where their tax dollars are going, right? Well, we're forced to pay all this money in taxes every year. It's not going to help rebuild the roads or, help improve our public schools or so many other areas here in this country where we desperately need help and need improvement. Now we're sending money overseas to go support the killing of Palestinian children. And the media should be honest with the public about that, no matter who's in office, no matter what political party it impacts. I don't care if it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Our coverage is, speaking of you and I here, it is not going to change just because Trump is in office, right? We're not going to look at what Trump is doing and go, oh, well, he's just brand new. Give him a few months, maybe a few more months. He'll get it figured out. No, we're going to be sitting here from day one saying Trump has been supporting a genocide. He's now officially supporting it as the president of the United States, exactly as Joe Biden did. And it's that refusal to wake up to the hypocrisy that it's crazy to me that people actually watch the mainstream media, not just to make fun of it or look at all of the hypocrisy that they share, but they certainly are incredibly hypocritical on a daily basis.
Yeah, I watch it as a form of entertainment because it's shocking to me, like what they get away with telling the boomers watching, like the audacity of the propaganda is fascinating. The same way someone would be fascinating if they were like watching a nature documentary. Like we watching the propagandists in their environment and how they will are seeing the techniques they use to trick people. And it is extremely fascinating because I've been watching a lot of corporate media the last few years. I'll watch and see what MSNBC is saying on stuff like Ukraine, for example. And then I will see which independent media is saying the same thing I've seen on corporate media, and it never fails. Like it'll be like, I will see a pro-NATO MSNBC segment talking about how the progressive position is to defend Ukrainian right to self-defense, like the bullshit you guys heard Ro Khanna said. And then I will hear Emma Vigeland, janky. So you guys know the usual suspects. They will come out and say the same fucking thing I heard on MSNBC, and then they'll get surprised when we accuse them of being MSNBC light. But anyway, that's a side point. we can get back to the story here. This is 60 minutes. This is a much shorter clip that I'll play all the way through. It's literally less than a minute. And they artful display the strategic gamesmanship of blowing up children with pagers. That was 60 minutes, guys. Don't forget that. They had Israeli genocidal politicians go on their show and engage in genocide denial with no pushback. Remember, this is the same 60 minutes that have done this over the last 14 to 15 months. Now, let's now see what they're covering now that Donald Trump is about to take office and Joe Biden is now. Do you guys catch it? These motherfuckers was holding on to this footage for 8 months.
This is the scene filmed in May by
In May.
Yeah. Yeah. How telling is it that they...
Go ahead.
How telling is it that now and the fact that they even say that, right? It's not just like, oh, this is, from when our crews visited Gaza. No, they're coming out saying, oh yeah, this was 8 months ago. Don't worry about it. As if that's not going to cause people to stop and think, wait a second, why has CBS News been holding on to this footage for the entire time? What would happen if they put this out in May of last year and told the people this is what the Biden administration is allowing, right? This is the absolute hell on earth, and they're just showing a fraction of it that the Biden administration is actively funding over in Gaza. What would be the result of that? And why are they so afraid about what the result could be that they decided they were going to hold on to that footage until after the election?
I love this tweet. A lot of the people who commented on this story. Just a reminder that they hung newspaper editors at Nuremberg. So remember, they had this footage since May, and they hosted countless genocide denialists on their platform since then. Too many to count. So what does that say about the integrity of Western media? Now, for a second time, there's no need to play this footage. It's essentially what I mentioned earlier. And this is not even the person that I got the source from, because I remember it was a guy who resigned from USAID who explained how he was fired for putting together a collection of Israeli war crimes, and then when he wanted to report it, they gave the crazy side is myself, but I think this is crazy. And she explained how the Biden administration hid evidence of war crimes, and their culture was systemically racist against Palestinians. So that's essentially what this. I'm summing up just for a second time. I'm not playing this clip. That's essentially what Hala Rarick said. I'll read a tweet from Hotspot. Former U.S. diplomat Hala Rarick revealed that the State Department colleagues pressured her to exclude images of dead or starving Palestinian children from her reports. Then she was eventually told to stop producing reports altogether. So that USAID worker who blew the whistle, it wasn't a one-off. And now let's get back to Leahy's law. This is my last thought. I'll get you in there, Rachel. Why did the Biden administration do this? The level of mob-style criminality cannot be overstated. So what happens if the Biden administration accepts their findings that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza? There's a reason why Anthony Blinken said, oh, we haven't found in our investigations that there's any war crimes in Gaza, even though they released a war crime report 2 days after Russia invaded Ukraine. You know what I mean? So the reason why they did is more than just pure raw politics. It's just gangster mob protecting their own ass of behavior. So if you write a report that shows that Israel engaged in war crimes, that means that finds you guilty of violating Leahy's law. So the reason why Biden refused to acknowledge any war crimes, and they never would, because that would directly implicate them, and they will be fleeing countries like Brazil, like we are seeing members of the IDF doing right now. You know what I mean? But we wrap that segment with there. That went a little longer than I planned. Rachel, anything else you want to add regarding this? In general, you can talk about Biden's legacy in Gaza, the corporate media, complicity with it. Anywhere you want to take. What's your last thought before I move on? We quickly covered the TikTok ban. I don't want to keep you here any longer than an hour, but we covered the TikTok story and we begin to wrap up. What's your thoughts, Rachel?
Yeah. I'll just add that don't be surprised if we keep hearing more stories like that, right? From the Biden administration, from these individuals, whether it's diplomats, whether it's individuals from the State Department who keep coming out in the weeks to come and are sharing these horrific stories of I was silenced in this way, or I was told that I couldn't report about that, because now is the time they want that information to get out, right? Let's get it all out now. That way we can move on, focus on the Trump administration, and then forget about all of the individuals within the Biden administration who maybe they tried to speak up, maybe they were just honest, right? In the sense of saying, okay, here is what's happening on the ground. Here is the evidence that we're getting from Gaza, and they were silenced in one way or another. It would not surprise me if we keep hearing more of those stories before the media quickly transitions over to the Trump administration and to whatever, ridiculous tweets Trump shares, or whatever exactly as they did during the first term, right? They did not come in and say, oh, well, Trump is supporting this war or that war. He's dropping the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. That's bad. No, instead, they focused on his personality. They focused on whatever frivolous thing that they could focus on to tell the American people Trump is bad, not on the war crimes that he was committing or enabling or supporting, because if they did that, then they would have to do that for all US presidents, and they simply can't do that because, God forbid, the mainstream media actually hold the US and the military industrial complex accountable in any way possible.
Very well said. And there's so many things I want to pick your brain on, Rachel. There's definitely was an enjoyable conversation. Let's see how much we can fit in here before we send you off. I would love to get your thoughts because apparently TikTok is about to go. They actually going through with it? So apparently this week, TikTok could possibly be banned. The Supreme Court is set to decide their final fate here. So I want to get your thoughts on the insane social media censorship and TikTok. Obviously this is dire, but at this point, and this is my opinion, kind of outside the box here. If TikTok goes, we're not really gonna miss much now because TikTok has already been fully captured by the Zionists. You guys realize that, right? This era of the wild west on TikTok has long since passed. I can't, my hotspot videos can't even exist on TikTok. So this TikTok already been neutered, but it shows how insane the censorship regime is. That's still not enough. It's still not enough. So just very quick, shotgun style, what's your thoughts on the TikTok ban that is set to happen? People are pretty confident that it's going to happen. So Rachel, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that we've got to this point, because I think that when it comes to the TikTok ban, a lot of this, the overall goal was to get the Chinese company ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American company, because you've got people like Kevin O'Leary that want to get their hands on this incredibly popular app. The interesting thing to me, though, is TikTok, it's not just the app, it's the algorithm, right? That's why people love it, because it has an algorithm that Instagram and X and Facebook, that they do not have. You go on Instagram and it shows you what Meta wants you to see. You go on X and it is the bizarre wild west of shock and awe content and whatever Elon is putting out there at the moment with, I don't even know how many tweets he has a day, but there are quite a lot of them. And then you go on TikTok and it's a much more curated algorithm, but you have ByteDance in a position where they're like, why would we sell that, right? You can't put money on this invention. And on top of that, they don't want US companies to be able to get their hands on it to then recreate it over and over again. But what has been kind of fascinating to watch is this argument first it was among Congress, now it's among the Supreme Court justices who literally range in ages from 52 to 75, right? These are the people who are there. They clearly do not understand the value of TikTok, just based on the reports that I've seen from their current arguments. It's like they do not understand this whatsoever. I would not be surprised if they banned it. I've also seen people saying, no, there's going to be some sort of extension. So I don't really know what's going to happen, but I do think it's fascinating when we bring up this conversation about data, and that you've got members of Congress claiming, oh, we're concerned because it's owned by a Chinese company and they could get access to your data and then they could hand that right over to the government in Beijing. But don't worry about Instagram and Facebook and X and all of these American companies that not only can they have. I mean, Facebook has literally offered up your data on a silver platter and made a lot of money off of it, right? These companies are tracking everything that you do, and then they're benefiting off of it. You are the product at the end of the day. And so to be in this position where you have a government that acts like they care about you, so they're going to come in, they're going to ban TikTok, and then that is going to solve all of your problems. It's just incredibly disingenuous. And it's a reminder too that the goal was not to ban this app. The goal was to sell it so that American companies could get their hands on it and then do whatever they wanted from there. I mean, they're not really concerned about any kind of foreign interference. They just want to make you think that they are so that they can further take away your rights, further, limit your free speech, and then at the same time set this very dangerous precedent so that if there is another TikTok in the future that they don't like, they can just come in and take it out, and we don't have to go through all of this mess of a months-long court case that gets its way all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, extremely well said, and I'm glad that you dismantled the talking point about the Chinese taking and stealing our information. Like, I'd rather Xi Jinping had that information than the American capitalists at this point. What is Xi going to do with my information that is so scary that we should sacrifice our free speech? Doesn't really matter. These are things that the ruling class say, and many Americans eat it up because they've been taught at a young age to be extremely xenophobic. The anti-China propaganda is so strong, they don't even question narratives. Republicans learn all they got to do is trick certain part of America to believe something and say China's tied to TikTok. Okay, I'll fuck TikTok then. That's all it takes. But we all know the real reason, because this reason is so ridiculous. They say this just to win over the right wingers. You know what I mean? And my position is that this is obviously the real reason, is the control of information. Zuckerberg, a lot of liberals are shocked at his free speech plague and him, quote unquote, appealing to MAGA. But why do you guys think Zuckerberg banned Trump for Twitter? Why do you guys think Zuckerberg labeled Zionist as a slur and implemented censorship protocols in the first place? And because the capitalists, they will do the bidding of whatever government takes power. So when Trump lost and the liberal wing was dominant, of course he advocated for liberal censorship. The same way that if Trump wins and the Republican get in charge, then Trump, and all of a sudden Zuckerberg like, oh, I actually always believed in free speech. Right. And that's how the tech bros, that's how they operate. So the real reason why we are seeing this ban on TikTok is because they cannot just immediately call TikTok in and moderate their content, as you were saying. The fact that they can't grill a Zuckerberg, the fact they don't have 100% control of the narrative, that's the most important thing. The control of the narrative. And it's not me. There's so many clips that we can show you guys, but this one's the best because it shows people who high up in the government saying it. There's so many times on Fox News where they straight up say, man, we got to ban TikTok because they exposing Israeli war crimes. They guarding sympathy for the Palestinians. So here's a clip where Anthony Blinken explains the real reason why we are banning TikTok. And then just in case you didn't get the point, Mitt Romney chimes in at the end to really drive the point home, just in case Anthony Blinken wasn't blatant enough on why we are banning TikTok. Let's watch the video and get your thoughts, and we will begin to wrap up.
Typically, the Israelis are good at PR. What's happened here? How have they?
You got to see how it immediately starts. Man, back in the day, the Israelis, they used to be good at PR. This is just like the Zionist cuck, Donald Trump. Donald Trump was decrying what he sees as a decline of Israeli influence in Washington. Remember that where Donald Trump was like, man, I remember back in the day, people was afraid to say anything about Israel. And Donald Trump was like reminiscing as if that was the good days when the Jews control how you think. Now, Now they're decrying the fact that people can actually speak out against Israel. So let's finish the clip. This is the premise, and this is really why they got rid of TikTok.
I mean, typically the Israelis are good at PR. What's happened here? How have they and we been so ineffective at communicating the realities there and our point of view?
Look, I think there are two things. One is that, look, there is an inescapable reality, and that is the inescapable reality of people who have and continue to suffer grievously in Gaza, and that's real, and we have to be focused on that and attend to that. At the same time, how this narrative has evolved, yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a good answer to that. One can speculate about what some of the causes might be. I don't know. I can tell you this. We were talking about this a little bit over dinner with Cindy. I think in my time in Washington, which is a little bit over 30 years, the single biggest change has been in the information environment. And when I started out in the early 1990s, everyone did the same thing. You woke up in the morning, you opened the door of your apartment, your house, you picked up a hard copy of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. And then if you had a television in your office, you turned it on at 6:30.
You guys see what he just said there? He said, back in my day, it was different. Back when we was a spook, back when we were starting wars in the 80s and 90s, that shit was easy because we had control of the information. Now, you guys know I'm pretty crude. You know, that's what he just said in a statesman manner. Back in the day, we had control of the information. If you wanted to know what was going on, you had to open a newspaper or you had to watch one of these cable shows that was completely controlled by feds. And now he's decrying that is no longer the case. That's essentially what he's saying. And now remember, Anthony Blinken is still a statesman. He is explaining why we need censorship, and he's doing it in a very statesman-like way. But just in case there's any doubt on what he is saying, Mitt Romney is going to come at the very end to drive the point home because he's not as good of a statesman as Anthony Blinken, because he's going to say the quiet part out loud because Blinken is trying to be very diplomatic about what he's saying here. But let's continue the clip, and I will let it get your interpretation of it, Rachel.
Street Journal. And then if you had a television in your office, you turned it on at 6:30 or 7 o'clock and watched the national network news. Now, of course, we are on an intravenous feed of information with new impulses, inputs every millisecond. And of course, the way this is played out on social media has dominated the narrative. And you have a social media ecosystem environment in which context, history, facts get lost, and the emotion, the impact of images dominate.
You see what he said? The images, the history, the context, all that get erased because people keep seeing the dead children that I'm responsible for. Them goddamn dead children. If only you guys wasn't able to see the dead children that I'm responsible for, we might be able to trick you. But you guys are seeing the mutilated bodies, the starving kids, the people being burned alive. God damn it. It went for them goddamn images. You guys see what he's saying? Rachel, I'll give you time. You want to chime in before I continue this clip? But you guys see, he's just openly saying that, man, if you guys wasn't able to see what we are actually doing, it'll be easier to manipulate what you believe in, which is why it's crazier that people even fall for this in 2024, 2025 with the access to information we have. I know I went for a while, so I'm going to give you a chance to chime in before I continue. Rachel, anything else you want to say before I continue this clip?
Yeah, I think what Blinken is laying out there is a reminder to all of us of why the U.S. mainstream media does not show the aftermath of U.S. airstrikes, right? They may show you the big boom. Oh, look, we did that. You know, we bombed Iraq. We did this and that. But they don't show you the aftermath on the ground because exactly as Blinken is pointing out there, those images, they change the way that people look at it. And we've seen that in real time. I mean, I have friends who have in the past been supportive of Israel, but when they see the way that these Palestinian children are being killed or they're starving to death and they see those images, that causes them to take a step back and go, wait a second, that's wrong, right? Why would I support that? And I think it's very telling that you have the government in this position where they're going, okay, we have to ban an app that we can't control, and an app that is solely images, right? It doesn't matter what the New York Times or the Washington Post put out on TikTok. What matters is that you have all these other independent creators who are now talking about Palestine, talking about Palestinian children, and talking about what the U.S. is supporting.
Very well. So I'm gonna finish the clip, no interruptions, because Mitt Romney. I love his lack of discipline in this clip. Maybe it's just me. I found it very amusing because Anthony Blinken, in my opinion, has actually been very well disciplined. He, in a very complicated way, is saying why we need censorship. But then Mitt Romney at the very end just blurts it out like an idiot. So I'll let it play so you guys see what I'm talking about.
And we can't discount that. But I think it also has a very, very, very challenging effect on the narrative.
Yeah, a small parenthetical point, which is some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok broadcasts. So I'd note that's of real interest, and the president will get the chance to make action in that regard.
I love how Mitt Romney at the end there, like, what this nerd really means to say is that fucking TikTok is ruining propaganda for Israel. Fucking nerd. This is what you really meant to say. That's essentially what Mitt Romney did at the end there. He showed his real undisciplinedness. Any final thoughts, Rachel? There's Mitt Romney saying the quiet part out loud. What I think is the main driver. There may be some other random concerns that they may have, but this is 100% the main driver. Rachel, final thoughts on this before we begin to wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember what we've been through, right? Especially over the last 15 months, because as right now you're looking at the Biden administration, they're talking about a potential ceasefire deal. You've got, Trump's members of the incoming Trump administration involved in that. What they're trying to do right now is they're trying to wrap this up, put a pretty bow on it. Maybe we can hear about some of the horror stories about what, Biden administration officials have been through, not being able to talk about Gaza. And then what I would expect that they're going to try to do is move on, right? Let's just move on. Let's forget any of this happened. Let's ignore the fact that Israel is still carrying on with this illegal occupation of the Gaza Strip, that they're still targeting Palestinians, and let's just move on to whatever the next story of the moment is. And it's a reminder to continue to pay attention to what the Palestinians are going through, what the U.S. is enabling, and to not just let the U.S. government get off scot-free on this one, because at the end of the day, all of this was made possible by the U.S. Israel would not be able to carry out this genocide, to target all of these Palestinian civilians, without the constant help and support, talking about military aid, public support, political support coming from the U.S. And I think that that's something that the American people really need to keep in mind, no matter, which politicians you support, which party you align with, or which belief system you align with. We need to remember that at the end of the day, this is what our country has enabled, and there needs to be justice for all of those in the Biden administration and all of those in the incoming Trump administration who continue to take part in it.
Very well said. The problem that our ruling class have with not only TikTok, but independent media in general is our ability to get together and share information. The fact that me and Rachel Blevins can even hook up and have a conversation in front of an audience terrifies them. The fact that a college dropout from the Midwest can have a conversation from a journalist from Moscow terrifies them. I have conversations with people who live in China like Jason Smith and Li Jingjing. That terrifies them, my friend. The lack of controlled information, which is why whenever I see them squirm about it, is extremely satisfying. I saw this headline, and I just want to show you guys this as we wrap, but I thought it was funny. This is where the woke culture war is going. I warned you guys. They hate the idea of an informed working class. And this is what the right is saying. The right, and this is coming from the Fox News boomer right, I guess, they are supporting banning TikTok because they believe that TikTok is brainwashing their children with woke ideology, and that's why they hate Israel. They hate capitalism because of TikTok, not because of their shared material reality, Now, I think this is a funny headline that I think drives my point against this anti-intellectual wave in our country and why people oppose TikTok in general. Look at this. Woke culture has become a breeding ground for anti-Semitism. So now, apparently you're woke if you call out the scourge known as Zionism. But the most hilarious thing about this headline in this direction that's coming from the right is that they decry the left for being quote-unquote woke for standing up against a systemic racism, sexism, and other social issues. But so isn't it hilarious how these cucks, they believe that you are woke if you call out anti-blackness, if you call out anti-Latino mindset. But the only people whose struggles are legitimate, apparently, are Zionist Jews. The same people complain about wokeness says they claim that we're anti-Semitic if we sneeze in the direction of Israel, essentially. Anyway, I want to talk. I might talk about this more. I might do a hotspot on this because the article is hilarious. But I'm gonna get my guests out of here. I just want to show you guys this is hilarious. Rachel, thank you for joining us. Make sure you guys check out Rachel Blevins. Always great to have you on the channel. Always great to see another independent media geopolitical voice thriving. Where can they find you, Rachel? Thank you for joining us on RBN.
Thank you.
Need last shout outs?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. And yeah, if you want to check out my page on Substack, that's rachelblevins.substack.com. I have exclusive content that's out there for paid subscribers every week. I have a weekly series that I do where we do a deep dive on a different geopolitical topic every week, and it's called Sanctions. So if they want to check it out, otherwise I'm on all of the platforms, including TikTok, at least for the time being.
Yeah, very well. So make sure you guys check out Rachel. Very enjoyable conversation. Tomorrow we have a Nick at Night live schedule. We will try to get the live with Carl Zod done. We was gonna do it last week, but unfortunately we had the storm here. My power went out literally right before the live stream. A few of you guys saw that moment where we were about to go live and then I had to cancel it. So Carl Zod will be joining us tomorrow. We also have Dave DeCamp joining Wednesday. So you guys know, banger after banger after banger. Another banger with Rachel Blevins. Thank you guys for watching. I will have a hotspot video released tomorrow as well. So make sure you guys follow all the work we do on Hotspot. Great anti-imperialist source. And support us on Patreon. That's how we continue to do this work. I appreciate all the support. Have a good one, guys. Take care.